Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. I hope you're having a great day. The other day I got a question from somebody that asked me if I would share how I got into camping, overnight camping, how I got over the fears, how I got through those first times that I did it. And so I put together some things that I did when I first started and then some things that I added throughout, because I will be honest with you, the fear, it's pretty, well, for me anyhow, I'm not going to speak for everybody because some people it's whatever, but for me the fear was pretty intense. I had never done anything to that extent on my own by myself out in the woods, so I was pretty scared the first time that I did, but I also went in being pretty prepared, and I hiked a lot the very first day that I did it. It was unintentional, and I was so exhausted that night that it made it really easy to just crash, at least for a good 5 or 6 hours before I woke up. So that being said, I put together some tips and I did write them down, because sometimes when I make these videos, I like to make them on the cuff. But then also when they're more informative and, give you ideas and safety items, I like to try to make sure that there's, I get everything in there that I feel is important. Sometimes when I just kind of go on the fly, when I watch those back, I'm like, oh, that, I forgot to put that in there. So here we go. So I'm going to kind of refer down a little bit to my notes. But I do want to tell you about the first night that I camped solo by myself, and that was on the Foothills Trail, and I started at Sassafras, and I was only going to go about 10 miles, and I overestimated my abilities at that time. So I never made it to the campsite that I wanted to make it to. I camped right next to a running creek, where there was a bridge, and just kind of like made myself a stealth site that was not necessarily ideal. There wasn't a lot of good trees to hang my food, so I ended up hanging my food over a tree branch that overhung the water, and actually almost lost my rucksack. So, that being said, was it the perfect scenario of what my idea of my first camping solo by myself in a tent was? No, it really wasn't. I envisioned it a lot. I would get there early and be able to relax and enjoy everything. And I was, chasing the dark and trying to get set up. I literally ate a piece of beef jerky for dinner, hung my bag, and passed out for the night. So it's very uneventful and a little bit stressful, considering that all of those things that you get really pretty quick at and efficient at on your first time out, not so much. So just be aware of that. Give yourself grace your first time out. But that was my experience. I survived it. I got up the next morning and I continued on my trek. I'm going to link the video that I just put out there about hiking alone safely, and many of those things are going to be things that you'll want to take with you on your first overnight packing trip. And so I feel like the number one is to make sure that somebody knows where you're going to be and how long you're going to be. And I'll reiterate that on this video, but that's also in my hiking solo video. So the first tip that I can give you is ease into it. You don't need to go and hike 10 miles out in the middle of nowhere your first solo camping trip, unless that's what you choose to do. If you're a relatively experienced hiker, you may choose, I'm going to go out there. But if you're new to all of this, stay at your local campground overnight in your tent. Stay at a state campground where you can have your car parked right next to your tent. And just, get what it feels like to sleep in your tent outside by yourself if it's something that you're not used to. Camp out in your backyard. What that does is it gives you a little bit, you're still outside, you're still exposed to the elements, the bugs, whatever might be running around in the night, but you do have that in your back pocket that if for some reason you become overwhelmed, then you do have a way to get out of that situation. That can be a good and a bad thing, because obviously it opens you up to being able to kind of like get out of it easier. But that's just kind of like, try it. I mean, it's better to kind of do it that way than it is to just throw yourself in the fire sometimes and maybe create more fears that might not have existed. The second tip that I have is, if you do park somewhere and you're going to hike in, just go hike in a few miles. You don't need to go and hike 10 miles in, just go in 2 miles or 3 miles or 4 miles. You know, trails along like the Appalachian Trail, and even the Foothills Trail, you know, you can park and literally just go hike 3 or 4 or 5 miles into, you know, a campsite or a shelter or whatsoever. So, you know, don't feel like you have to do an all-day hike from sunup to sundown before you set up camp. My third tip is pick a trail that has more hikers on it potentially, depending on the time of year. Trails such as the Appalachian Trail or the Foothills Trail, for example. Most likely you are not going to be alone on those trails at certain times of the year because they're heavily traveled, they're well cared for trails, and you're usually not very far from, you know, if you need to get out for some reason, being able to get off trail. The next tip, the fourth tip that I have, is choose a campsite where the views trump your fears. I stayed at, I'm trying to think, it was right before Seiler Bald, and I don't remember if it was a campsite or if it was actually a shelter. And then the next morning I hiked up to Seiler Bald and I was like, oh, I wish I would have camped up on the top of Seiler Bald. And that being said, obviously weather needs to dictate that. If you're going to be up on a bald or up, you know, higher in the mountains, you want to be really sure that the weather conditions are going to be ideal for you to camp up there. But if you have your fly open and you're looking out and you can just see layers and layers of mountains or views, trust me, the fears that you have, a lot of those are going to wash away. They're going to wash away because the pure joy, I don't even know what word to use right now. So help me out in the comments, like many of you that have done that, where it's just so magnificent that it kind of like shifts that scale of things that you might be afraid of because the reward is so much greater. Let's see, number 5. Camp next to a water source or have low music playing in your earbuds or wear earplugs. If you are somebody, I'm going to tell you, last year on the AT, my first attempt on the AT, I wore earplugs every single night. I was so terrified of every little stick crunch, every little leaf blowing, every little tiny, that I just couldn't get to sleep. I couldn't get myself to fall asleep because I was focusing on those noises. This year, I'll tell you, I only wore my earplugs twice and they were due to snoring, not because of anything outside. But to kind of alleviate that in the beginning, if that's something that's kind of bothering you, if you camp next to a running water source, you're going to hear the rushing of the water all night. So that's going to help drown out a lot of the more quiet night sounds that you may hear, or having music, or you know, having music going, or wearing earplugs so you don't hear that. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. My 6th one is for just security purposes, and this goes back to my how to hike safely solo. Obviously you're carrying, you know, safety items to make sure that you're secure. I plant those in sporadic locations on my body, in my bag, in my tent, wherever you feel that you need to plant those, so that if you need to access something, you can reach it. And that's all I'm going to say about that. Put your fears aside and enjoy the peace and the beauty of the experience. So try to focus your energies on the peacefulness and the beauty of the experience that you have chosen for yourself. And don't focus on the fear, because, you know, we choose our perspective, right? We choose where we put our energies. So if you can put your energy on that beautiful bird that's singing, or, you know, or just the green, or the flowers, or the mushrooms, or whatever, then that energy that you would put in maybe being nervous about something, it's going to move it into a different direction, and it's going to help alleviate that. Remind yourself how amazing that you are for doing something that's so radically outside of your comfort zone, and just focus on that. Because truly, if it's, especially like with me, this was never something that I would do, that I ever saw myself doing. Hiking alone, camping alone, sleeping out in the woods alone, and realize how truly amazing you are. And you are amazing and special. So enjoy that time, because when you're back at home with the kids running around, or your job sitting in your cube, you're gonna be living in those moments. Trust me, you will be living in those moments. Be sure to watch my video that I just put out last week on hiking alone safely. Many of the tips that I have in that video are going to be tips and tricks that you will want to incorporate when you go out on your first solo overnight camping trip. So I will link that video in the description below. Hopefully it'll pop up here or here. I don't know how to make that happen, but if not, it'll be in the description below, and make sure that you watch that video. And these are more just kind of mental focus things that you can do. That video will give you some things that will probably give you some greater peace of mind. So I hope that this helps. And if you have any other tips and trips that got you through your first overnight camping experience on your own, please put them below in the comments and let me know, because I'm sure that there's plenty more that I haven't thought of. I just wanted to put out there the things that I found that worked for me. Happy trails, everybody, and have a wonderful day.